Hi, everyone. My name is Koleya Karringten. I'm the Executive Director of the Canadian Blockchain Consortium, and I'm really looking forward to this interview today with Bitcoin Well. They were founded in 2013 as one of Canada's first providers of secure, accessible Bitcoin ATMs. Bitcoin Well has been an absolute force for supporting wider education about buying, selling, and transacting in the world's first cryptocurrency. In 2001, the company became the world's first publicly traded Bitcoin ATM company. Very excited about that, and continues to innovate solutions for creating wider access to Bitcoin to the Canadian market. So I'm here today with the founder and CEO, Adam O'Brien, and the Chief Revenue Officer, Dave Bradley, as they join us for this interview on Bitcoin's future, the company's path to public market, and their plans for future growth. So thank you so much for joining us here today.
Hey, thanks so much for having us. Pleasure to be here.
Thanks.
Awesome. Well, I'll start in with my first question that I know everyone is dying to hear. What are your predictions for the price of Bitcoin for the end of the year, and why?
End of the year, I have gone on record, like publicly and privately, I guess, in my social circles, and I've made the bold claim to say six figures by the end of Q3, which is like, well, today's the 10th. So we've got 20 days for that prediction to come through. I would, there's a reasonable case to be made if you do some like looking at the halving and what reactions have been since halving, that six figures is like before end of year is probably likely if you subscribe to a certain like 4-year mining cycle to price stock to flow ratio. So yeah, I'll leave it fairly broad and say six figures by end of the year.
I'm hoping it goes down. I think I'd like to buy a lot more Bitcoin.
The revenue guy wants numbers to go down.
Generate some revenue and then use that money to buy Bitcoins.
That's a pretty good take, actually. I'll accept that.
I have to say, I personally wouldn't be disappointed if the price of Bitcoin did go down, because I would love to buy more. Of course, I know everyone's really excited for like, it's going to be $1 million or eventually like one Bitcoin will be generational wealth. And I totally appreciate that that day is coming. But until that day, I'd like to stock up on as much as possible. So I
100%
share Dave's opinion on like, could you just go down like a little bit more?
Just 10%. We have a Bitcoin savings plan here at work, and so with our paychecks, the team members can choose to get paid a portion in Bitcoin, and it's always funny, like the Wednesday, Thursday before payday, and the price starts like dipping. Everyone's like, "Oh yeah, good, we're gonna be able to stack more sats this payday." So it's funny, and then the price goes up. But it's like the only 2 days of the pay period when people are like, "Oh man, the price is going up. We should, why is it going up so high?"
I'd also say that you can tell how all in someone is on Bitcoin, whether they want the price to go up.
It's true.
Because the people who have a little bit of Bitcoin, a little bit of their net worth in Bitcoin, they want the price to go up so they can sell it for more dollars. And people who are responsibly all in, like myself, want the price to go down so we can buy more.
It's a long-term play.
Well, this might be an unpopular opinion, but I definitely don't hold any assets other than Bitcoin and your stock. And the only reason that I bought your stock was because of how bullish I know you guys are on Bitcoin. But other than that, I do not invest in anything other than Bitcoin. So yes, having it go down would make me happy so I could go buy more. All right, so my next hot topic question for you guys. The US infrastructure bill. We at our magazine, we actually just did our August issue or September issue actually on how they are absolutely, clueless on crypto. But what do you think is like the biggest issue with that bill?
So like the primary one is just like the lack of the irresponsible take that they had on who is governed by the bill, like their definition of broker. And I think the consequence to that is like wildly underplayed right now. The consequence is that all innovative companies just leave the US. So they've like proposed this bill as like, look at all the tax revenue we're going to get. This is a win, for the country. But what they're not understanding is that Bitcoin is creating a competitive environment for government. And if there is an environment that is like even just remotely close to what the US is able to offer without that crazy, misguided governance, the companies and all of the tax dollars are going to just flow right there. So I think that the consequence to like what they've done is just insane, or it stifles innovation. I mean, in typical misguided bureaucratic fashion, it's going to stifle innovation. And I really think that this goes to show how little like democracy is actually involved in lawmaking. We're like choosing who goes in, but then there's like very little, industry analysis or industry consult for making these rules and regulations for where it's been, which is, I think, like the grass, that's the root problem of the whole thing. I don't know if you have any thoughts.
Yeah, it's a friend of mine likes to say that democracy is just communism with extra steps. So you got this like 2,000-page bill that nobody in the world has read. There's probably not even one person who's read the whole thing. And somebody just throws this stuff in there without knowing anything about the topic that they're trying to regulate. And like Bitcoiners will leave. Like we're a digital economy and we don't need to be in the United States. And if they end up implementing that, if they end up essentially going after the developers, they'll just leave, and that will cause a brain drain of the smartest, richest group of people in the world, which is early Bitcoin adopters. So I think we're on the verge of this never before seen transfer of wealth to the people who had the foresight to get into Bitcoin. And if the United States overregulates that, they're going to miss that entire boat.
Oh, absolutely. I think that on top of just like a lack of consulting in the industry was a complete and utter lack of understanding on the technology itself, like going after developers who've created like open source wallet platforms. You can't expect for them to comply with a level of reporting that makes no sense. And even for miners, the reporting that they're expecting on miners are going to push more miners ideally into Alberta. I would love to see a lot more mining operations happen up here. So, because we had another issue on that one, we call it kind of like the great mining migration, since a lot of it's leaving out of like Asia. Americans aren't going to want to do that level of reporting, so it'll come up here. So it's definitely disastrous for innovation. I consult with the Blockchain Association down in the States, and they just spent an incredible amount of time trying to like petition Congress in Washington to explain to them like this bill is going to be devastating for it, but there hasn't.
It's kind of crazy how like the whole industry unanimously was like, this is not the way it needs to be. Like it's quite shocking that like it's not really politics at this point. It's like, unilaterally, this is wrong from the whole industry. Competitors are like banding together to fight government in like how wrong this is. And I don't even know that you really see that. Like even with like the social media stuff that's going on right now, you see like Facebook throwing shade at Twitter, throwing shade at TikTok. And it's like, well, we're not as bad as those guys, so focus on those guys first. But with the crypto or the Bitcoin community, it's like, no, this is just fundamentally broken. And it's really quite shocking to see the severity of that is like quite real.
Absolutely. It's going to be quite devastating. So to another topic, how do you think the Bitcoin market will change that so many companies, including PayPal and Visa, are starting to offer these Bitcoin services?
I think it's interesting that, well, first of all, I think it's great that they're offering that because it gives legitimacy. And I think that it will create a bit of a divide in like Bitcoin owners and ownership. And like there's a small and growing number of people that buy Bitcoin for like, a hedge against the dollar. You've said that before. I've said that before. Like it's like the reason they're wanting to buy Bitcoin is because they don't believe in dollar. But that only really works when you have custody. Like the self-custodyship of Bitcoin is one of the most like revolutionary and changing things that like the average layman can hold millions of dollars in wealth. That was just like not really possible before. Even with gold, you needed like pretty serious security in place that wasn't truly accessible to like just average guy on the street. And that is accessible like through Bitcoin. You can store your Bitcoin properly with like a small amount of work. But I think that we're going to see a rush of, it's like a Trojan horse almost, where because that the early Bitcoiners journey always ends with like a Bitcoin only self custody ship, mantra. And PayPal is going to be like it's going to attract the people that are just interested in like selling later for more dollars and force them to go down this path of understanding what Bitcoin is used for. And then eventually they will, sell the Bitcoin on like PayPal, where you can't take custody and it's just a derivative of Bitcoin, and enter into like a self-custodied Bitcoin. So I think it will kind of accelerate that growth. It will get more people in, and then it eventually will be seen as like a Trojan horse for why people, for why self-custody is so important.
Yeah, I think, excuse me, those companies obviously have a huge opportunity given their size and market positioning. And, the Bitcoin space is going to need payment processors. Like we're not that different of a business than a payment processor ourselves. But I think to Adam's point, like if they don't go down that road of custody, they're going to lose that battle in the long term, because that ability to hold your wealth is a big part of what drives people to actually use Bitcoin. And on top of that, it's actually a pretty big risk if you think about it. These companies, billions of dollars of throughput, they're used to handling transactions of all kinds of sizes and massive volumes, but they're used to operating in the traditional financial system that kind of has a safety net. So if somebody logs in and hacks PayPal and steals $1 billion, $1 billion US dollars, and somehow wires that out to an account somewhere, there's going to be this massive paper trail that they can follow. They're going to be able to use law enforcement to recuperate those funds. But once these companies start holding Bitcoin, they just become like a giant honeypot for a hacker. And I wouldn't trust PayPal to hold my Bitcoins. I think the chances that they end up holding a large amount of Bitcoins that then subsequently get stolen are not low.
I wouldn't disagree with you on that one. One thing I am really fascinated about is how like the payment processors are going to start losing some market shares. There's an article that came out now that El Salvador is completely accepted Bitcoin as legal tender. 70% of their population actually receive remittances from all over the world. And Western Union is expected to lose almost 23% of their revenue, which is about $400 million if they stop using Western Union and start just using Bitcoin. So it's definitely going to disrupt some companies for sure. I do hope I do hope people don't use PayPal to deal with their Bitcoin personally, because not your keys, not your coins. To me, it's just a Bitcoin grab for these companies. And yeah, if they're not used to transacting in this space, there's just a huge risk of loss. Same as leaving any of your money on an exchange. It's just high risk, little reward.
100%. We also haven't really seen how like the kind of only benefit that you'd have from keeping your coins on a centralized service like that is like the insurance, but we haven't really seen a good example of how insurance does or doesn't react to theft. Like there was that one, was that Ethereum custodian, was it Fire something, or I forget what they were called, but they had like $70 million worth of Ether kind of locked in like oblivion, and it was insured, but the insurance company was like not paying it out. So it's kind of going to be interesting to see, like, it is inevitable that money will go missing without question. Who pays for that money is going to be kind of the ultimate question, I think, whether it will be the customer or will it be the shareholders of PayPal and the shareholders of the business. And so it's going to be pretty fascinating to see how that plays out kind of like in the future, and not just to target PayPal, like PayPal or any other, service that is offering that money. But yeah, that's a great point about the remittances. It's gonna be really interesting to see how that functions.
Yeah, when I've seen insurance policies for Bitcoin custodians, most of them include something like disclaimer that it doesn't cover employee theft or negligence.
Negligence.
Like if you're not negligent, you're not going to lose the coins. So as soon as you lose the coins, you've now been negligent.
Absolutely. Well, on that topic, with El Salvador as formally adopting it as legal tender, how do you think it will impact the country's economy? What kind of adoption do you think that will mean for the rest of the world?
I think I was talking about this last night, actually. It was with some buddies. We were discussing El Salvador and stuff. I think it's going to be pretty interesting to see how the country, like how it actually responds. Like we saw McDonald's, like headlines, like McDonald's and Starbucks taking Bitcoin. It's super cool. The Bitcoin community is like, it's working. This is great. But I would be surprised. Like, frankly, I don't know of any other thing politically that El Salvador has done. Like nothing else in El Salvador matters, right? The only reason it matters is because it's Bitcoin and because of what that means. And so I think that, El Salvador in and of itself is kind of like a moot point to a certain extent. But I think what it's doing is it's creating a pretty good test case for, bigger countries that unfortunately have more weight in the world. And so I think that not dissimilar to how other countries are watching the Canadian cannabis space, I think Canada and other countries hopefully are looking at what El Salvador is doing, and taking notes and like making policies based on that. I don't think El Salvador will be the last one, for sure it won't be. But I think that each country that kind of adopts Bitcoin as tender will do it a little bit differently and a little bit more improved, which I'm pretty stoked on. I think that's pretty awesome.
Yeah, I don't think that the legal tender side of it matters that much with El Salvador in particular. They're essentially forcing the population to take Bitcoin, which is not really a path to adoption. I think it's a lot more interesting and relevant that the country is actually holding Bitcoin. They've got, I think I saw they had 300 Bitcoin or something like that. Not a massive amount for a country, but definitely like a toe in the water.
It's like a fraction of what MicroStrategies has.
Yeah, exactly. It's, but I don't think El Salvador itself is going to succeed at all in what they're doing, kind of trying to be a hub and a beacon for Bitcoiners, because I think, like to start off with, it's like, let's get a bunch of rich nerds, send them to the fourth most dangerous country in the world and see how it goes. That doesn't seem like a good plan. But beyond that, Bitcoiners who are very mobile, as we mentioned before, most of the reasons that Bitcoiners migrate places are tends to be increased freedom, and that's not something that you see in El Salvador. It's not a highly free country. It's a despotic regime that controls their population with a pretty tight fist. So I don't think those things line up with the values of most Bitcoiners. And I think ultimately you're going to see, right after that announcement, we saw prominent shitcoiners like Brock Pierce flooding the area. And I think that's what the place is going to turn into, because it's the real Bitcoiners who believe in the underlying values of Bitcoin and are pursuing freedom are not going to move there.
Agreed. That's probably one of the best ways I've heard it put. It's just like, you're not going to take a lot of rich nerds instead, and we can see how it goes. It's like, well,
yeah, how is that going to go?
Not great.
I mean, Dave would do horribly in El Salvador. Just a rich nerd.
Hold on.
Not very strong, not very good looking. I don't know what he would do.
I have heard tale that he is the strongest and best looking Bitcoiner in the world. So I'm very sure that he will be able to hold off at least 100 angry men with guns. With the strength as well as his looks, he will just absolutely blind them with the.
I gotta be accurate here. I think the claim that I and many others have made is that I'm the strongest and best looking Bitcoin entrepreneur in Canada. So,
okay.
Yeah, there could be one or two Bitcoin entrepreneurs in El Salvador that are stronger and better looking. It's rather unlikely, we have to all concede, but it's possible.
I definitely feel like I'm just going to dip my toe into that ring and say I'm the better looking Bitcoin entrepreneur in Canada. Maybe.
She has a great point, Dave.
Bitcoiner at least.
There's probably a few people that could be called Bitcoin entrepreneurs in Canada that are better looking, and there's at least one that I can think of that I know is stronger.
He's beside you.
But but I don't think there's anyone that's both.
Except for the guy beside you.
I'm gonna let you two duke it out for that title, but I'll just say I'm gonna take the crown for cutest and and leave it at that. So I'm really interested in this next question because I've been following you guys for a while. I remember Adam seeing your ATMs go up at our very first technology symposium that Dave and I put on to kind of launch our Alberta Blockchain Consortium way back in the day. And it's been absolutely incredible to watch the journey that you guys have been on together and this path to going public. And I'm super proud, huge cheerleader over here. But what does the future hold for Bitcoin Well in terms of growth for your business development?
It's a really good question. It's something we've been focused on quite heavily for some time, and it's funny as we enter this world of like public markets. We have an opportunity to, I think, really show the world what we can do, and we like our mission is to ultimately shift the way that society, like the relationship that society has with money, and you do that by like there's three ways that you do that. For us, it's offering non-custodial financial services. It's having the technology to be able to do that, and then educating. And that education piece is a pretty big part of it for us, I think. But what we're hoping and what we're looking to ultimately do is create an environment and an ecosystem where a user can interact with their money with the same conveniences that like modern banking has. And we have to be honest, modern banking is super convenient. It's like push a few buttons and money flies around, Canada. You tap your card and there's your chai latte. Like it's quite convenient to have Canadian dollars. And as a contrast to that, or as a comparison to that, like using Bitcoin is not quite as convenient as that. I mean, banks have been around for hundreds of years. Bitcoin's been around for 10. So there's a reason as to why, but our goal is to create an ecosystem that allows users to interact with their money with the same ease and convenience as modern banking, but with the security and within the realm of security that Bitcoin offers, of like what I talked about earlier, self-custody of Bitcoin with the underlying monetary principles that Bitcoin offers as like a monetary supply. So, in like super broad strokes, that's kind of where we're looking at. And as far as, growth goes, that kind of happens in 3 stages. And like the first stage is, buying Bitcoin, right? What good is Bitcoin to you if you can't buy it? The second stage is like using or selling Bitcoin. So being able to get out of Bitcoin when you need to do that. But then that third and arguably most important stage is kind of the, being able to take Bitcoin and use it in your daily life. Like the point of, currency conversion is like not that useful or efficient. You have to you get on a plane for 3 hours, you need different money. That just sucks. So Bitcoin offers a solution to that. But it's not a great solution right now because not many people are kind of accepting it. So we need to kind of make Bitcoin a little bit more usable in ways to, like we do pay your bills with Bitcoin, buy a gift card with Bitcoin, all that kind of usability piece. That's kind of where it's sitting.
That's a big answer.
Yeah.
We're
I'm full of rambling answers this morning. I had like a cup of coffee this morning, so I was just like motor mouth. Here we go.
The short version of that is yes, we're going to keep growing.
Dave's a man of many words.
I love it. Are you guys allowed to give like stock price predictions or like where you hope it can go?
What does Dr. Evil say?
No.
No, we're definitely not allowed. I think all the alarms in the building just went off when they heard that. And it won't be long before there's like a big muzzle jumps in here and just goes over my mouth.
No. All right. We'll keep it.
I think what we can say is like we're definitely focused on like long-term value. Like we are certainly not looking short-sighted, and short-sighted looks are like rash decisions that aren't truly pushing our vision and our mission forward, which is like financial sovereignty for everyone. That's what everyone needs, is financial sovereignty. We are going to be giving the opportunity for citizens to have financial sovereignty. And so we're definitely focused on the long term and really, really excited to hopefully be able to give some pretty solid products that users want to use, but that also, people are important to people, just as important as like email was to communication. I think that Bitcoin, and in turn the products that Bitcoin Well develops is going to be important for the future of money.
Yeah. Speaking of our stock price, I would say that I would recommend anyone who's interested to check out the roughly 1 month of public disclosures that we've been filing and look for relevant details and compare them to other companies in the industry and draw your own conclusions.
Oof, I love these political answers.
Yeah.
All right. Well, since I'm not an employee, there are definitely other companies out there with overvaluated stock prices in comparison to yours. So you guys do like a lot of like educational events and programs. You have like a physical location in Edmonton. I love that you opened a physical location in Calgary. I have seen your orange couch there. So what kind of people do you guys typically have coming in? What are they most interested in learning about?
It's a lot of newcomers right now, I would say, and that's probably because of the price action, I think. So in Calgary especially, we're hosting a Bitcoin for Beginners class. I think it's monthly, that's going on in the office, and it's been great to see a bunch of like newcomers, come in learning about Bitcoin, which ends up into learning about financial sovereignty and self-custody and all the good stuff that Bitcoin kind of offers. But definitely hoping to kind of in the future create like a real community hub where people are able to come in and have different workshops and different classes, not dissimilar to like here in Edmonton. We have a startup Edmonton group, and they have a whole host of events for many different people, some technology, some business minded, some marketing minded, some UX focused. And I think that we want to create a community, and certainly in Alberta, but also across Canada, where people can come and share their learnings and learn from each other and create like a decentralized network of learning. Is like, I think that'd be pretty cool. It'd be great.
Yeah, it's interesting to see, especially with some of these beginners things. We're starting to see the demographics shifting.
Yeah.
I was talking about like all the rich nerds, and when I first opened my first Bitcoin store in 2013 in Calgary, it was 95% men, I would say, maybe more, and very nerdy, mostly like 15 to 40 years old, pretty much the exact same demographic. And we're starting to get a lot more women. First of all, I think the space is still mostly dominated by men, but a lot more women coming into the space. And then we're starting to see an older crowd getting interested and coming to these new Bitcoin intro courses and whatnot. And I think that's pretty interesting because the people in that age group, like we're seeing a lot of like sort of like 55 to 65-year-old range. These are the people that have savings, right? These are the demographic that are sitting on cash, and they're the ones that are losing that value. And so they're starting to see Bitcoin as a hedge.
They're also like super spooked in the last year. Like,
yeah,
there's a lot of people in that demographic, like you said, that had savings and like investments, and those investments just got eroded with the the COVID crash and the COVID wave, which is why they're hunting.
Yeah, and I think like these people of all ages, but especially that sort of age group, tends to have a lot of money in the markets, and the markets are up. The markets are at all-time highs in spite of the world economy being decimated by global communism. But the actual savings, people with money in the bank, that value has been significantly eroded. And I think like people are starting to see it. It hasn't really sunk in. It's kind of unbelievable, but the M0 money supply, which is like the base layer of money in Canada, 80% of all the dollars that are out there have been printed since April of 2020. And that's shocking. Where, they talk about like, we've got this like thoughts of adjusting our inflation target to 3%. And it's like, no, the inflation is like, we're at 500%. Like, we're at the brink of hyperinflation, and people are starting to see that. And those are the people that we're starting to see coming into these new courses and jumping in.
Absolutely. I was watching an interview with Pierre Pulvari recently, and he was interviewing the leader of the Central Bank for Canada. And he was like, don't you find it fascinating that you produce $3 billion a week and our Canadian government takes on the debt from you of $3 billion a week, like $150 billion of production in a year. And the bank is creating what the government is borrowing. It's like the people.
Yeah, it seems like a pretty backwards way to do it.
Where's the value? Like, I know a lot of people kind of question, like I get questions all the time from people like, well, what backs Bitcoin? Where does Bitcoin get its value from? And when you start trying to explain the fiat currency system and the fact that you can just like hyperinflate and print at the rate that Canada's doing it, it's just like, describe
Where's the
where
value?
it's getting its value from. I don't
Yeah,
see
it just
backed by.
in both cases, both hold value only because everyone agrees that it holds value. One is just because, a certain group of people have put dedicated thought and research into why, it holds value, and it's backed by math. And then the other is because we've been taught and told that this holds value with no, don't question it, and you're too dumb to understand. So we'll leave that to the bankers. And it's, what the politicians, it's backed by politicians and the promises of politicians. So I think that both are, yeah, it's an interesting dichotomy. When you actually start thinking about, I get that question too, obviously. I mean, anyone in the industry does. And answering that question with more questions is, like, in my opinion, what has worked the best. Because it's amazing. Like, just the same question back is often like, I actually have no idea why I think the Canadian dollar has value.
A lot of people will answer that it's backed by gold, which is just obviously not true anymore, right?
Well, and just recently, Canada just sold off the last of their gold reserves to buy a pipeline, I think, or whatever they did with it.
Helicopters.
Probably helicopters.
No, to further Adam's point, like money is just a consensus, and the consensus around the Canadian dollar that we all believe in is delegated from the government, which is a massive conflict of interest because they're also the ones that get to print and spend the money. So they're not the ones that should be trusted to form that consensus. And with Bitcoin, the consensus was kind of emergent. So it started out as nothing. And then over time, like when Bitcoin was new, it wasn't really money. It was like just this unit of account that didn't mean anything. And over time, starting with the guy who bought the pizzas, it formed into this consensus around money, and now it's an unalterable hard supply that that's the real value. We can't ever change that, and as long as that consensus is maintained, that's never going to change.
All right, well, I have one last question for you guys before we go. I know everyone kind of has their how I got into Bitcoin story, but I would love to hear each of yours.
How I got into Bitcoin. Why don't you say that one first?
Yeah, I was.
You're significantly older than I am, so you had the advantage there.
Yeah, I was,
older, stronger.
just
older, more frail. So taller is true.
I was looking up video cards for gaming, maybe 2010.
Nerd.
Right around the time that they first invented the ability to mine Bitcoin with graphics cards with GPUs. And I was just like reading a forum, and somebody was like, if you buy this one, you can also mine Bitcoin. And I was like, oh, what's that? And I looked it up, and I bought a more expensive video card than I would have otherwise bought. And it paid for itself. The price spiked shortly thereafter, and the card paid for itself in about 10 days. And I was like, okay,
that's cool.
Do that again. I ended up buying, filling up my basement with computers mining Bitcoin. And then of course I had to pay for more computers. So I started selling the Bitcoins, and I was the only person, I think, in Alberta selling Bitcoins. And so I would meet people at Tim Hortons, sell them some Bitcoins. I'm pretty sure they thought I was a drug dealer at Tim Hortons. And at some point when I had met like 5 people at the same Tim Hortons in one day, I was like, okay, I should make this into a real business now.
Oh, I love that.
Our story. And that's not long before I met Adam.
That's kind of when I met Dave. I don't really exactly remember like what I was reading or what I was looking at, but Bitcoin had just kind of hit like its milestone $100 in I think it was March 2013, and I kind of saw it on like same thing, a forum, or you just read stuff online. I don't remember what I was reading. And I was like, wow, this fake internet money, this is something that I, want to try. And so tried to go buy some and found the experience to be like quite difficult to buy Bitcoin. Like there's no Bitcoin ATMs. There was like an online exchange in Russia, and that was kind of an online exchange, not in Russia, but you had to wire money to Russia in order to get money there. So I kind of was forced with like meeting this guy in a back alley and had this like really weird experience. And then not like everything I've ever owned in my life, not even that I've owned, anything that was in my house, whether it's mine or my dad's or my mom's or my sister's, was been always for sale. Like I just love selling things. And so I found a way to buy this Bitcoin, and then I immediately put it up for sale on Kijiji. And I just kind of had like, I ended up selling a little bit of the Bitcoin and making more money than I had. And I thought, wow, that's great. Like, I could, same thing as Dave, like this should be a real thing. And so I just put a standing ad on Kijiji. I was just like buying and selling Bitcoin. And, I'd meet people in Starbucks or McDonald's or Tim Hortons and sell Bitcoin. And I would drive to Calgary, buy Bitcoins from Dave, drive back to Edmonton, and then sell them up here in Edmonton. And then shortly after was when Mitch from then Bitcoiniacs launched the world's first Bitcoin ATM. And I like loved that. I was like, wow, it's way better than me going to Starbucks. I can just put one of those in a building and send people there. And it's obviously more scalable and easier to manage. And so bought a Bitcoin ATM and then deployed that in Edmonton. That was Alberta's first Bitcoin ATM, which is pretty cool, in 2014. And then did the same thing in Saskatchewan in May 2014. And kind of just, that's kind of the organic, natural progression. It was kind of a side hustle turned business, turned like life, and turned passion. And it's it's been a fun ride. It's been 8 years, I guess, since I've been in the game, which is kind of cool. Dave's significantly longer in the tooth, and also longer in Bitcoin. And it's been fun. Dave and I have always kind of been like friendly competitors. And I think that's part of like the whole space. Like even our competitors now we talk with, and like, we don't talk strategy and stuff, but we certainly talk industry. And, we're definitely, this industry is so cool because it invites collaboration, and it invites ways to like work together. And, we know that we're stronger in numbers. And Dave and I, having been friendly competitors and kind of just chatting back and forth a few times a year to, multiple times a year, and then into like a few times a month, we ended up kind of just being like, hey, we're doing the same thing here. We should do it together. We'll be a lot stronger together. And that's kind of how, Dave ended up joining the team and helping us go public, and brought us to kind of where we are today. It's been fun.
That's fantastic. Well, thank you guys so much for this interview. It's been lovely. For all of you listening, there is Inventures coming up in Calgary, Alberta on the 22nd and 23rd of this month. And both Dave and Adam and other members of his team will be speaking at it. So if you haven't already done so, you should go to the Inventures website, get your tickets, and definitely come and not only hear these incredible gentlemen speak, but also get to meet them in person. So thank you guys so much for your time today. This was wonderful.
No problem. Thanks, Koleya.